Refurbishing a model traction engine, part 4, water gauge and pressure gauge. And here, on the kitchen table, are some of the parts that I need to do the job. The traction engine can only be on the kitchen table for another couple of days, because my daughter Charlotte comes back off a holiday on Monday. And she wouldn't really say anything, she's okay like that, but I don't think it's very fair for me to have a 1.5-inch scale traction engine on the kitchen table as a permanent feature. I've removed the canopy and so it's on with the job. This is the old gauge glass. And in this clip I'm using some of the excellent wire wool sent to me by Richard from Australia. And look at the finish that it gives on the copper pipe leading up to the pressure gauge. This piece of pipe is the wrong size and this was fitted to allow compressed air into the boiler. I used a piece of the wire wool to clean this as well. Back to the water gauge and just look at the state of the glass. This is no good, so I looked in my box of pieces of glass for water gauges and I selected a new piece of glass which is the same diameter as the old piece, except it's longer and it's not broken. The tool that I'm using is designed to cut water gauges on model steam engines. I bought it via eBay a while back and it's really good. It's just a cutter and you just rotate the work against the cutter, which scores the glass all the way around and you just snap it off. In this clip I'm getting rid of the sharp edges on a piece of 400 grit wet to dry sandpaper. For two reasons. One is the obvious one, so I don't cut my fingers, and the other reason is so the glass tube doesn't cut the O-rings as I fit them. A quick test with my finger tells me that this is quite smooth. Before fitting the glass to the water gauge, I gave it a bit of a clean with the wire wool. This water gauge is a bit clumsy and a bit overscale for the traction engine, so the last time I was up at Blackgates Engineering, I bought this. This is an extremely high quality 3-cock water gauge. They really are quite expensive but very good. Here's a comparison between the top fitting of the old water gauge and the new one from Blackgates. But I'm not going to use this water gauge because it's in a position on the traction engine where it's not very visible and it's designed to use a lesser diameter piece of glass than the piece of glass fitted to the original water gauge. In this clip I'm cleaning up the nuts that hold the glass in place. If I was going to fit the smaller water gauge I would have to fit a gauge protector and the glass is hard enough to see where it is on the traction engine to start with. And here I am fitting the water gauge glass. It was really fiddly. Unfortunately my hands are quite large. When you see my hands next to a model, please bear in mind that from the tip of my little finger to my thumb is 9 inches, so my hands are quite large and it should give you some idea of the size of the parts that I'm working on. For some jobs it's a distinct disadvantage having large hands, but for keyboard playing it's definitely an advantage and I can play a 15th interval quite easily. If you don't know anything about music, please ignore that last comment because it won't make any sense. That's the new gauge glass fitted. Now I'm going to turn my attentions to this. It's a T-piece that I fitted to the boiler. One end of it connects to the pressure gauge and the other end of it normally has a blanking plug on it when I'm running the engine in steam, or removed when I want to run it on compressed air. There's quite a lot of rust on this engine now, as my friend who I sold it to stored it in a cellar. It's worth mentioning that if you must store models in a cellar, a dehumidifier is not the answer. Parts will still go rusty. Many years ago I lived in a house and the only place for a workshop was in the cellar, and I had a lathe and a milling machine and various tools, and I still have a lot of the tooling. I was in the workshop a lot in those days, as I still am, so there was a heat source in the cellar most of the time when I was in there. Anyway, I'm wading through the rust removal, starting with the flywheel, which looks okay now. I'm going to fit the T-piece using a shim washer and some Loctite 542. And I selected a shim washer that makes the T-piece a tight fit on the union. So it probably wouldn't leak anyway, but just in case I'm using some Loctite 542. And in this clip I'm showing the fitting of the part in place on the backhead. I used my trusty Barco spanner to get it into the right position, because there came a time when my fingers weren't strong enough. And here I'm using my small Barco spanner for the final tightening so that the thread is uppermost and I can fit the pressure gauge to it. And talking about pressure gauges, here it is being fitted to the T-piece. You can clearly see the arrangement. So now all I need to do is fit the blanking plug on the end of the T-piece that's sticking out of the boiler. Back to de-rusting the flywheel, I started off with 400 grit wet to dry sandpaper to remove most of the rust, Then I used a piece of Scotch-Brite, and then to get a very fine finish, I'm using some of this brilliant 000 grade wire wool. This is a steering wheel, which I think is in cast steel, and it was bright red rusty when it came back from my friend. Thanks to a bit of elbow grease with some Scotch-Brite, followed by the very fine wire wool again, it's looking good. It's a fairly slow process, but I will get this traction engine back into the same condition it was in when I sold it to my friend in the first place. These metal parts on the wheels are known as strakes, S-T-R-A-K-E-S. And these were also quite rusty. I'm cleaning them up with some wet to dry sandpaper once again. Originally these wheels will have been skimmed in the lathe when they were completed, so it's better to go in the direction of the lines that are already there from the machining process. The latest thing sent to me by a kind viewer is this. Look, it's red layout fluid. This was sent to me by a man called Norman, who also sent me some blue marking out fluid, so I have two colours now of marking out fluid. I'll just test this red marking out fluid and see what it looks like. I'll paint my thumbnail with it. Interesting, it looks like blood. This would be really useful stuff to use on Halloween, and it would be really funny to see all the trick-or-treaters going to school the next day covered in fake blood because it doesn't come off very easily. So maybe it's a good idea to stick to using it for its intended purpose, marking out fluid. I thank Norman for the marking out fluid and making my metal working easier, as now I generally drill the holes in the right place, and also thanks to Richard once again for the wire wool. I've put the canopy back in place because it's really nice eating my breakfast looking at this thing on the kitchen table. And that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful.